She knocked on his door in the rain with a baby. What he said changed everything. The rain came down like bullets on the cabin roof, each drop finding its way through the rotting shingles. Samuel Garrett had been listening to it for 3 hours, waiting for the storm to break. When the knocking started. 3 soft raps. Then nothing. He set down his tin cup and reached for the rifle leaning against the stone hearth. Visitors didn't come to his canyon, not anymore. Not since he'd made it clear that solitude was the only company he wanted. The knocking came again, weaker this time, like whoever stood outside was losing strength. Samuel crept to the window and pulled back the moth-eaten curtain. Through the glass streaked with rain and years of neglect, he saw her, a woman in a torn dress, dark hair plastered to her skull, holding something wrapped in a blanket against her chest. She swayed on her feet like a tree ready to fall. The baby's cry cut through the storm, thin and desperate. His hand froze on the rifle. 20 years of running, 20 years of keeping the world at arm's length, and now this. A woman with a child, begging shelter from a man who'd forgotten how to offer it. The baby cried again, weaker now. And something cracked inside Samuel's chest like ice breaking under spring sun. He opened the door. She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much, green as bottle glass, hollow as abandoned wells. Rain dripped from her chin. And the bundle in her arms had gone terrifyingly quiet. "Please," she whispered. "He's dying." Samuel stepped aside without a word. She stumbled past him, bringing the smell of rain and fear and something else, blood, maybe. Or just the kind of desperation that clung to people like smoke to clothes. He closed the door behind her and threw the bolt. Though he wondered if keeping the world out was still possible now that she'd brought it inside with her. The woman sank into the chair by the fire, peeling back the blanket with trembling fingers. The baby underneath was small, too small, with skin like old parchment and lips tinged blue. Its chest rose and fell in stuttering gasps that sounded like death knocking at the door. "How long has he been like this?" Samuel asked. Though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. 3 days, she said, not looking up from the child. "Maybe 4. I've been walking since." Her voice broke like a rope under too much weight. "I saw your smoke from the ridge. Please, I know what you must think of me, showing up like this, but he needs medicine," Samuel finished. His hands moved without his permission, reaching for the child. "May I?" She hesitated, then placed the baby in his arms. The boy was burning up, fever cooking him from the inside out. Samuel had seen this before, in other children, in other lives. Lung fever, probably brought on by cold and wet and too many nights sleeping under stars that offered no warmth. Thunder rolled through the canyon like the voice of judgment. And Samuel felt the weight of choice settling on his shoulders. Help her. And bring whatever darkness chased her down on his head. Turn her out. And watch innocence die in the rain. The baby's breathing hitched, stopped for a heartbeat that lasted forever. Then resumed with a sound like wind through broken glass. Samuel made his choice. Samuel worked through the night, brewing willow bark tea and forcing spoonfuls between the baby's cracked lips. The woman, she'd whispered her name was Clara, sat watching every movement with the intensity of someone who'd learned that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. By dawn, the fever had broken. The child's breathing came easier, his color returning from death pale to something closer to living. Clara wept silently, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks. "You saved him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel handed her the baby and stepped back. "The fever's gone. But he's weak. Needs proper food, warm shelter for a few days." He paused, studying her face in the morning light filtering through his single window. "You can't keep running with a sick child." Clara's arms tightened around her son. "You don't understand. They'll never stop looking." "Who?" She was quiet for so long Samuel thought she wouldn't answer. Outside, a mockingbird called from the canyon wall, its voice echoing off stone like a prayer bouncing back from heaven. "My husband was Thomas Brennan," she finally said. "Maybe you heard the name." Samuel's blood turned to ice water. Every man west of the Mississippi knew that name. Thomas Brennan and his gang had robbed 17 banks, killed a dozen lawmen, and burned half of Sweetwater to the ground before disappearing into the Badlands. The bounty on his head was $5,000, more money than most men saw in a lifetime. "They caught him 3 months ago," Clara continued, her voice steady as stone. "Hanged him in Tucson for his crimes. But the law says his blood money belongs to his widow and child." She laughed. But there was no humor in it. "Sheriff Marcus Kane wants that bounty. Doesn't matter that I never robbed a bank or hurt a soul. Doesn't matter that this baby never knew his father. Kane says guilt runs in bloodlines." Samuel knew Kane by reputation, a man who wore a badge like armor and twisted justice into whatever shape served his purposes. The kind of lawman who'd chase a woman and child across 3 territories for the promise of gold, calling it righteousness while his pockets filled. "So you've been running," Samuel said. 4 months now. Ever since they buried Thomas. Kane's been hunting us like we're rabid dogs." Clara looked down at her son, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. "I thought maybe if I got far enough away, found some place where his name didn't carry weight." She shook her head. "But there's nowhere far enough, is there? Nowhere a man like Kane won't follow money." Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky above the canyon showed clear blue. Not a storm coming, something else. Something that made his skin crawl with the memory of other times, other choices that had ended in blood and regret. Hoofbeats. The sound grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls like drumbeats announcing Judgment Day. Samuel counted them by sound, 4 horses, maybe 5, moving with the deliberate pace of men who knew their quarry was trapped. "Back room," he said quietly, motioning Clara toward the cabin's rear chamber. "Don't come out no matter what you hear." Clara's face had gone white as winter snow. "They found us." The hoofbeat stopped just outside. Samuel positioned himself by the window, rifle ready but held low. Through the glass, he watched 5 men dismount in the cleared space before his cabin. 4 wore the rough clothes of hired guns. The 5th man wore a badge that caught the morning sun like a promise of authority. Sheriff Marcus Kane was younger than Samuel had expected, maybe 40, with the kind of clean-shaven face and pressed clothes that spoke of a man who'd never missed a meal or slept cold under stars. His eyes swept the cabin with the calculating gaze of someone pricing everything he saw. "Hello the house," Kane called, his voice carrying the false courtesy of a man used to being obeyed. "Sheriff Kane, Pima County. Looking for a woman and child. Wondered if you might have seen them." Samuel opened the door but kept the rifle in his hands. "Haven't seen anybody for weeks. This is a lonesome place." Kane smiled. But it never reached his eyes. "Mind if we look around? Just to be thorough." "I mind plenty. This is private property." From inside the cabin came the faint sound of the baby stirring, a small cough that might as well have been a gunshot. Kane's head tilted like a hunting dog catching scent. "You know what your problem is, friend?" Kane said, his hand now resting openly on his gun butt. "You think hiding behind that rifle makes you dangerous. But I've got 4 men with me. And you're just one old hermit who's forgotten how the world works." Samuel felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest, the same feeling he'd carried through 3 years of war, through a dozen gunfights he'd tried to forget. "Maybe you should ask your tracker what else he saw," Samuel said quietly. "Ask him about the graves." Kane's smile faltered. The morning air grew still as death. "You threatening an officer of the law?" Cain's voice carried a tremor he tried to hide. Just sharing history, Samuel replied. Those Pinkertons who came before, they were so sure they had the right to take what they wanted. Right up until the moment they realized they'd cornered the wrong man. Cain's gun cleared leather first. But age and caution made him hasty. The bullet splintered with 6 inches from Samuel's head. Samuel's rifle spoke once. And Cain spun backward into the dust, his badge catching sunlight as he fell. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions, bullets whining off stone and chewing chunks from the cabin walls. Samuel dropped low, working the rifle's lever, placing shots with the precision of a man who'd learned to kill when killing was necessary. When the smoke cleared, 2 men lay dead and the others had fled toward the canyon mouth. In the sudden silence, Samuel heard Cain gasping in the dirt. The sheriff was gut-shot, dying slow and hard, his clean clothes already soaked with blood. Samuel walked over and knelt beside him. Cain's eyes were wide with pain and the terrible understanding that his hunt was over. "The woman," Cain whispered. She's worth 5,000. "Not to me," Samuel said. Cain's breathing grew ragged. Who are you?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, watching blood pool in the dust beneath the dying man. "Name's Samuel Garrett. Used to be Captain Samuel Garrett, Army of the Tennessee. Before that, I was a lot of things. Most of them I'm not proud of." Cain tried to speak again. But the words came out as bubbles of blood. He died with his eyes open, staring at the sky he'd never see again. Clara emerged from the cabin, her child quiet in her arms. She looked at the bodies, at the blood soaking into the earth. And her face showed no surprise. She'd seen too much to be shocked by violence anymore. "They'll send more," she said. Samuel nodded. "Probably. But not today." She studied his face, seeing something there she hadn't noticed before. "You didn't do this for the bounty." "No." "Then why?" Samuel looked up at the canyon walls, at the sky stretching endless and blue above the desert. "Because sometimes a man gets to choose who he wants to be. And I chose not to be the kind who watches innocents die."